Good afternoon and welcome to the court's January 2025 swearing-in ceremony. Please keep your audio muted throughout the ceremony. If you wish to follow the speaker, you may want to set your view to speaker view. Mr. Jason LeVay, Chief Deputy Clerk of the Court of Appeals, would now offer opening remarks.
Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to the District of Columbia Court of Appeals. I wanted to extend a congratulations to everyone. You're at the finish line of a very long journey. I hope after today's ceremony that you take time with friends and family to celebrate, because it is a big accomplishment. This is the first bar ceremonies of 2025, so I wanted to reinforce, please make sure to keep your phones muted, at which time I ask to administer the oath. There will be a point in there where I will ask you to swear. If you have an objection to use of that term, you can substitute it with the word affirm. And again, congratulations, and I'll turn it back to Ms. Farmer.
The courtroom clerk will now open the courtroom.
All persons having business before the Honorable Associate Judge now presiding over the District of Columbia Court of Appeals, draw near and give your attention. God save the United States in this honorable court. This honorable court is now in session. Please come to order.
Honorable Judge Howard will now offer introductory remarks.
Good afternoon. My name is J.P. Howard, and I'm an Associate Judge of the District of Columbia Court of Appeals. On behalf of all of my colleagues on the court, I am so pleased to welcome you, your families, and your guests to our virtual bar admission ceremony today. Generally, when I sit to hear cases, it's an adversarial affair. It is always a pleasure to preside over these uniformly joyous occasions, and without any worry of the potential conflict of interest of seeing former Chambers family members here to be sworn in. Hey, y'all. And I can happily inform you that by the time we finish here today, you will all be prevailing parties. As you may know, the Court of Appeals is a relatively new court. We were created by Congress in 1970, and I'm going to proceed to give you a 30-minute black letter law lecture on that point. Just kidding. To review appeals from the district's trial court, the Superior Court of the District of Columbia, as well as appeals from DC's administrative tribunals. The court very quickly into our existence created the DC Bar to help oversee and aid us in our duties to oversee members of the bar, including ruling on motions for the admission of new members. Today, the motion on your behalf will be made by Ms. Ilea Welch, staff attorney for the Committee on Admissions. Counsel.
Thank you, Judge Howard. On behalf of the Committee on Admissions of the District of Columbia Court of Appeals, I, Ilea Welch, staff attorney for the Committee on Admission for the District of Columbia Court of Appeals, move the admission to the bar of this court, the applicants whose name appear on the attached list and who have satisfied the requirements for admission to the bar of this court. On behalf of the Committee on Admissions, I certify to the court that these applicants possess the necessary qualifications for admission to the bar. Thank you. Judge Howard.
Thank you, counsel. Soon to be new attorneys of the DC Bar, I have received this motion before today's ceremony and given it review. And I know that the Committee on Admissions has devoted a great deal of time to your applications and would not have put you on this list if anything whatsoever were out of order. And so I am pleased on behalf of this court to grant the motion to admit today's candidates, all of you, as members of the DC Bar. I will now recognize Mr. LeVay, our Chief Deputy Clerk of the Court, to administer the oath.
Thank you, Judge Howard. Would you all please stand and raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear or affirm that as a member of the bar of this court, I will demean myself uprightly and according to law, and that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America. Thank you.
Honorable Judge Howard would now give judicial remarks.
Thank you. Let me start with the fact that I love that so many of you followed the instructions so directly and still have your hands raised. You are free to lower them now, digitally here. As you may have guessed, it's a tradition at these swearing ceremonies for the presiding judge to give some remarks. I also bear in mind that we are doing this right after lunchtime and during the prime siesta hour. And so in consideration of that and any celebration you may have planned with your family and friends after this ceremony, I'm going to aim to be brief, relatively, and follow my former colleague, Judge John Fisher's commandment, thou shalt not be boring. Congratulations to all of you. I understand the majority of you are joining us via exam, and even though you have to stay on mute and can't answer me, it didn't turn out to be as bad as you feared, did it? It is my pleasure to welcome you to the DC Bar, which, as you heard a little bit earlier when I discussed some of our history, is just over 50 years old. You are joining a special fraternity. While DC is one of the smallest geographic locations in our nation, something of a city-state, our bar has over 115,000 people practicing in all 50 states and in over 80 countries. We are one of the top bars in the world, and virtually anywhere you go in this nation or on this globe, you will find fellow members of your bar. What you'll also find in the DC Bar is training, high-quality materials and publications and opportunities to connect with your fellow attorneys. DC does not have continuing legal education requirements for bar membership, but still thousands of attorneys register for CLE programs put on by the bar and its communities and participate in those communities. That's not an accident. I personally like our use of the term communities, which replaced the term section a few years back and more aptly describes what you can find in the bar based on your interests. This bar excels in mentorship, connecting colleagues, and training leaders. You'll enter practice with the broad resources of it available to you, and I hope that you'll take advantage of it. After describing the bar, I want you to know that the bar you've joined possesses not only size and breadth, but true depth. No reading of a reasonable list of historic figures of this bar would allow you to go home before tomorrow or the day after. However, I want to highlight a few for you, perhaps focusing on some you may not yet have learned much about. As of today, you are a member of the bar of Charles Hamilton Houston. A native Washingtonian, Houston was a graduate of the M Street Academy, now known as Dunbar High School, before going on to Amherst University. After graduating, he went and fought in World War I, and his experiences with racism during and after the war compelled him to seek a legal education as a means to advocate. He went on to Harvard Law, where he became the first person of color on the Harvard Law Review. Sitting much as you are today as a newly admitted member of the bar, it was 100 years ago, 1925, that he co-founded the Washington Bar Association, when attorneys of color were not allowed into the existing voluntary bar. A young Houston went on to become the dean who initially sculpted the legacy of the Howard University School of Law, teaching Thurgood Marshall, Spotswood Robinson, William Bryant, Oliver Hill, Damon J. Keith, and another entire list and generation of attorneys who I could explain at length for a couple days about, who would go on to make historic impacts. He also led the first all-Black legal team representing a Black defendant in a criminal case, just a stone's throw away in Loudoun County, Virginia. That case is significant not just for that, but because it was the case that he pioneered the approach that he would go on to become famous for, where he hoped to lose the case and use it to appeal the question of the exclusion of all but white men from juries at that time, all the way to the Supreme Court to seek a ruling. It was a prototype for the work he would do at the NAACP, where he founded the Legal Defense and Education Fund to give his struggling former research assistant Thurgood Marshall stable employment. Houston was involved in guiding nearly every civil rights case to reach the Supreme Court over the 2 decades leading to Brown v. Board, a victory he foresaw but would not live to see the fruition of, earning Houston the title of the man who killed Jim Crow. Your bar is also the bar of Judges E. Barrett Prettyman, William Bryant, and H. Carl Moultrie, for whom the D.C. Federal Court Building and Annex and our Superior Court Building are named. It's the bar of Charles A. Horsky, a historic figure in many ways, who was among the champions for home rule for the district. We're the bar of David A. Clark, for whom the UDC School of Law is named, and Arrington Dixon, the 2 attorneys who served on the first D.C. City Council after we gained home rule in the 70s, as well as Walter E. Washington, the last appointed and first elected D.C. mayor after we gained that home rule. just over 50 years ago. We're also a bar of nationwide firsts, including, among many others, Judge William Hastie, Charles Hamilton Houston's little cousin, who followed the path that he blazed, and our predecessors on this court, Judges Hubert Pear, Julia Cooper Mack, and Chief Judge Theodore R. Newman. I could tell you your homework assignment is to go look those up, but to give you a quick answer to it, that is, Judge Hastie was the first Black federal judge, and Judges Pear and Cooper Mack were the first Black judges in American history on courts of final appeal, and Chief Judge Newman, who we lost just a couple years ago, was the first Black chief judge on a court of final appeal. All of these things occurred in the 60s leading into the 70s as the DC Bar, as it is known to, led the way. We are a bar whose members have historically impacted our city, country, and world and continue to today. Whether in public interest, government service, or in any variety of private practice, the attorneys of the DC Bar bring their skills to bear daily. You have the opportunity now to be the future, with scores of examples to follow and mentors to find guidance in. Returning to Dean Houston, he has a number of famous quotes, but a favorite of many is that an attorney is either a social engineer or a parasite on society. As grand as that statement may sound, we are not all called to shatter historic barriers and fight high-profile battles, though you can find such struggles more easily and earlier in your career than you may think. Engineers tackle problems. The root of the word comes from a medieval Latin word that meant to contrive or devise, which filtered through Old French into Middle English, much like most of the language of the law, and on to today. As an attorney, you have a unique skill set to navigate systems and devise strategies that can be brought to bear to address the problems of those around you, especially those who cannot afford representation. Even if an individual case or transaction does not impact the district or the nation, it can change the world for the individual, family, or organization who you're advocating on behalf of. Some of you are already engaging in careers dedicated to public interest, but even in private practice, your dedication to excellence and practice across billable, pro bono, and the low bono work you do is an answer to Houston's charge, and you have an ethical duty to take on such work when you can. That pro bono and low bono work will be some of the most rewarding work that you will do, and speaking from experience, some of the work that you will remember and pride yourself on the most, and it is vital to our system. Our colleague so accurately commented in similar remarks a number of years ago that the underpinning of our system functionally is that when parties are represented by competent counsel who practice diligently, the system in theory can weigh competing narratives and get to a correct choice with some accuracy. That function is fragile and easily breaks down when representation is missing. I urge you at some point here early in your career to go to our Access to Justice Commission website and look at the staggering statistics on representation. In some of the cases of our most vulnerable populations, housing, domestic violence, family, probate, and administrative related matters, the numbers are stark. And that's before you combine additional access issues such as language and technological barriers, which were further enhanced by the pandemic. The courts have done tremendous work and continue to evolve, and legal service providers have expanded at historic rates, but the problem continues to grow faster. We need engineers. We need you. Equal justice under law, those words etched on the Supreme Court, are not only accomplished in the interpretation of law by judges, but in providing access to justice through representation. I want to assure you that there are many ways you can get involved and many top-class organizations that will support you with training to ensure that you can do so with full confidence and capability. Finally, and I know you're all glad to hear the word finally, let me give you some brief advice. Unlike many hypothetical problems, your work won't typically come on evenly weighted playing fields anymore. It won't be leveled out. That's why your ethical duty is to zealously represent, not to win no matter what. You're at a new starting point now, and no amount of prestige from the hard work you've done before will defeat diligent, hard, smart work going forward. Hone your skills and learn from everything. Continuous learning is one of the blessings of this profession. And in a field where your reputation is slowly built and can be quickly lost, I want to remind you that civility and confident humility are your allies. My father used to love to charge that people should aim to command respect, not demand it. And that starts with respecting everyone around you, something he lived. This is a collegial profession where you take adversarial positions. That sounds somewhat contradictory, but your ability to work with opposing counsel while maintaining your client's position, not changing yourself even when opposing counsel is difficult or unreasonable, will be to the benefit of your client, you, and any decision maker. Ultimately, you should try to have a sharp mind, not sharp elbows. Invest genuinely in people and never forget that relationships are always an end and not just a means. And lastly, I hope that you'll take time to reflect. You joined an incredibly hardworking profession, and it is so easy to get caught up in practice to the exclusion not only of your life outside of work, but to consciously guiding your career. That you can look up decades later, perhaps to a wonderful career, but still wondering where the time in your agency went. Pursue your passion, reflect, proactively decide what you want to do, and don't ever say no to yourself. Congratulations again to you and your families, those you were born into and those you chose. I and my colleagues join them in looking forward to your every success and the great representation that you will do in front of us and everywhere else that you appear. Thank you.
This honorable court is now adjourned.